Hello again, friends. Welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. It's Emerson Phillips with Gamecock Central columnist Scott Davis. Scott brings us a fan's perspective each week here on Gamecock Central. And, Scott, a very interesting read this week, your latest piece on Gamecock Central. It is not, as you pointed out, it is not a Fire Chad Holbrook column.
It's not. And to be honest with you, I always check the reaction to my columns, and I think that, if anything, more people wanted me to say that I wanted to see Chad Holbrook fired. There's a lot of anger in Gamecock Nation right now because the truth is, Emerson, baseball is what South Carolina had. That's what we had to work with. You know, football's always been mediocre, basketball's been up and down, but baseball's what we had. Even when, going back to the 70s and 80s, South Carolina has been a good baseball program. And then, of course, Ray Tanner took it to heights that we'd never seen as a university with our athletic programs. And we were literally the most elite program in the game. And I think a lot of people are struggling with the reality that now, not only are we not elite, we're just not very good. And that's just where this team is right now, and so there's a lot of anger out there.
So it's not a Fire Chad Holbrook column, Scott, but you point out that there are some alarming facts about this Gamecock baseball team that can't be ignored. Most likely that, first and foremost, that the Gamecocks lost 2 out of 3 to Kentucky this past weekend. First time the Gamecocks had lost at home to Kentucky, lost a series at home to Kentucky since 1999. And that's 5 straight conference series losses in SEC play now, Scott.
Well, the Gamecocks joined the SEC in 1992. I was going to school there at the time, and so, yes, I'm incredibly old, and I've been watching a lot of South Carolina baseball, and they've never done that in their entire history. And not only that, they've been losing games in just maddening fashion. They battle and compete for most of the game, and it seems like at the end they wear down. You go back even to that Clemson series. They could have swept that series, really. A series they ended up losing 2-1. They won the first one in Clemson, came to Greenville, led the entire game, and then gave it up at the end and went to Columbia. I think most fans at that time still were feeling positive about the season and felt like they'd get the job done at home, and again, led the game most of 9 innings, had 2 outs in the top of the ninth to close the game out, and gave up a home run and it ended up losing in extra innings. And so it's been a lot of those types of games. They went to Florida a couple of weeks ago, won first game there, had an opportunity to win that series on the final day and led most of that game and gave it up at the end. Sunday against Kentucky, they battled back, were hanging in, and wilted at the end of the game. So I think there's a feeling from Gamecock fans that for some reason this team just lacks the ability to close out wins, and it really has resonated with the fans about as much as anything I've seen in a long time. I think Gamecock fans were ready to move on from the Steve Spurrier era when he stepped aside at midseason. But I just can't remember a time when I've seen Gamecock fans this upset and disappointed with the way one of their athletic teams has performed.
Gamecock Central Radio today, Emerson Phillips with our columnist Scott Davis. We invite you to download the Gamecock Central Radio app on the App Store and on Google Play. You can subscribe to our podcast, search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. The app is free. Our podcast is free. Download the app today. Scott, I've said it many times, baseball carried the flag for the University of South Carolina Athletics Department for many years, long before Lou Holtz and Spurrier and Will Muschamp, before Frank Martin, before Dawn Staley. Gamecock baseball, going all the way back to the 1970s, carried the banner for the University of South Carolina Athletics Department. And Ray Tanner came along and took the program to new heights, 3 consecutive trips to the College World Series finals. That had not been done in 40 years. In college baseball, Carolina won 2 or 3 national titles during that time. So Holbrook had some very big shoes to fill, and I think folks were misleading themselves if they didn't think that there was going to be some kind of a drop-off at the head coaching position for Gamecock baseball. Ray Tanner became the athletic director. Holbrook was his right-hand man, longtime assistant, but he's had big shoes to fill, Scott.
He really did, and you're absolutely right. You know, as we've talked about many times, you and I are close to being the same age. We both followed South Carolina athletics for a long time, and really the only thing in my lifetime that you could count on for South Carolina was baseball. You know, I was born in 1973. The Gamecocks made the College World Series, I believe, in 1975. They've been pretty good in baseball since. And Ray Tanner, as you just said, was, as I said in the column, Ray Tanner is our Bear Bryant. You know, every college is looking for a coach who kind of resonates throughout the decades, and he's that guy for us. So it was going to be hard for anybody who took this job. For some reason, I think Chad Holbrook has had a little bit more of a difficult time connecting with the fans than just anyone else would have, and I'm not sure why that is. It may be something in his personality. It's just been, for him, a difficult road to hoe. You know, I mentioned in the column he goes out and critiques the fan support before the Gamecocks have a critical series against Florida, and I get that. I really do. If people nitpicked my job and what I did on a daily basis publicly every day of my life, I'm sure I'd show some frustration. So I get that. But the fact is, you just don't see any success stories anywhere in any sport throughout history of a coach criticizing his own fans and being successful at it. It just doesn't work. And so things like that, combined with the losing, have made it a difficult path for him, and I'm just not sure he can win back over this fan base short of making it to Omaha this spring, which I don't think anybody thinks is going to happen right now.
Don't want to make too much of a ado about the situation that we're talking about here. The comments that Holbrook made recently about Gamecock fans do nothing to benefit him, the team, the program, or the fan base. So I'm totally on board with you with that, Scott. But that being said, Holbrook is one of the best people. He's one of the best men you'll ever want to meet, and that's what makes this such a tough situation. And I think his comments were out of frustration. He's frustrated. Players are frustrated. Fans are certainly frustrated. Everybody likes Holbrook. Everybody wants to see him do well, but the bottom line in this business is exactly that, the bottom line.
Yeah, unfortunately it's true, and I made great pains to say that in this column. I think Holbrook, just, you know, I don't know him personally, of course, but just from what we've seen him do publicly, he seems to be one of the nicest guys that has ever coached South Carolina. He's relentlessly worked hard, doing some charity work since he's been here. Those are all things that you can't ignore and just pretend aren't happening. And so that's why I spent a lot of the column saying, you know what, I don't really like talking about this stuff. I'm not happy that Chad Holbrook is probably the most unpopular coach on South Carolina's campus right now. I don't feel good about that. And that may have been part of why some of the early reaction I've gotten to this column has been, hey, this should have been a Fire Chad Holbrook column. But that's not something that I feel comfortable doing or saying. And, you know, listen, my hope is still that he gets this thing turned around, that they win out the rest of the way, make the tournament, and go on a crazy run and unexpectedly look around in June and find themselves in Omaha. That's what I want to happen. But I think that we had reached a point with this season and with the reaction to what was going on. And you got to look at the fact that Founders Park has been empty the last couple of SEC series. And that's just something that's never been the case for South Carolina baseball. So, you know, I hope it works out. I hope they go on a run. But I did feel like it was something we needed to talk about.
Scott Davis's new column is up on GamecockCentral.com. The headline is Last Days of a Dynasty, a bit of an uncomfortable read, Scott. You mentioned at the outset, take a deep breath before you read this, say a few Hail Marys, pet your dog for a second, and then dive into this column. Interesting read, Scott. Final question, do you think the Gamecocks make a change at the end of this year?
You know what? I actually thought about writing my thoughts on that. And to be honest with you, I don't. I just don't think Ray Tanner is going to be ready at the end of this season to say that my first pick as an athletics director was a failure, that a guy that was my assistant coach for years and helped me go to Omaha and was in living rooms with me when I recruited great players who helped us win titles was a failure. I just don't think he's ready. This season hasn't been a disaster. You know, you look at a team like Alabama who's 2-19 in the SEC, which is just staggering in baseball. That's a stunning number, you know, and they haven't bottomed out like that. And in some ways, sometimes it's easier to bottom out because you know you need to make a change. When you're just kind of treading water, it's a little harder to do that. And so I think Chad Holbrook will be back for season 6, and I hope it goes better than this one did.
Scott Davis, our guest here on GamecockCentral.com. Scott, it's been a really difficult year. People are quick to forget that the Gamecocks made the Sweet 16 of college baseball last year. They hosted a super regional, but 5 straight losses in SEC series now and a road trip to a perennially very good LSU team this weekend. You got to believe there's a chance it could be 6 straight conference series losses after this coming weekend. And, you know, you're exactly right. There's a chance that the Gamecocks could get it together and make a run in the tournament, and all this would be forgotten about. But I just don't think optimism is very high right now, particularly in the fan base, that that's going to happen. The injury to Clark Schmidt was devastating, and I just don't think optimism is high that the Gamecocks are going to get it in gear.
Yeah, it's not, and that's why this column was written. Yep. It was, you know, as we've talked for the last couple of years about what I try to do and what my role is, and that's to kind of take the temperature of the Gamecock fan base and speak to what they're feeling. And the reality is there just aren't a lot of people who believe in Chad Holbrook right now, whether that should be the case or not. And we've talked about whether it should be or not.
I agree with you.
I think that, you know, you're right. The feeling that will happen, that they'll make a run and get to Omaha, it seems slim right now, and I think that's the way a lot of people feel.
I'm with you, Scott. I think Chad Holbrook will get every benefit of the doubt from Ray Tanner and the University Athletics Department administration. I will be shocked if the Gamecocks make a move this offseason, but with each conference loss weekend after weekend, the rumblings get a little bit louder from the fan base talking about maybe it's time to make a change at the head coaching position for Gamecock baseball. Gamecock fans just not used to this kind of a season. Ray Tanner set the bar very high. Scott, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
As always, Emerson, good to talk to you, and I hope the next time we talk, we're talking about something exciting that involves lots of wins for South Carolina.
Something a little more pleasant next time would be nice. All right, let's hope that's the case. Thank you, Scott. For Scott Davis, I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for being with us for Gamecock Baseball Talk.